So this month marked the release of Halloween Ends, the 13th film in the Halloween franchise, and the first of these many convoluted timelines that this franchise has to have both a beginning and an end. The reality is that right out of the gate, this movie was likely difficult to accomplish. We've never known what it was like for a Halloween ending to be successful, because if you look at all these timelines, we haven't actually had one before now. The title alone here is almost a statement from everyone involved. This is the end. This is that finale that the franchise has craved for so long. Halloween 2018 resurrected the franchise from a grave dug by Rob Zombie's attempted reboot duology from the 2000s. It was successful from a wide range of outlets, with Jamie Lee Curtis returning to play the iconic horror final girl Laurie Strode. This was the beginning of a brand new timeline, one that saw everything apart from the original film erased from the canon. It is a tremendous success and a fantastic horror movie, and you've probably already seen it, so I don't need to tell you that. Halloween Kills released after being delayed like many other films when it finally released, and it did so to a collective sigh of disappointment to most who saw it. Like every film, it does have its enthusiasts, with me being one of them. Despite my issues with really poor character writing and pushing Michael to the side, I think this movie best highlighted just how far gone Michael Myers is. Flaws and all, this is the film that confirmed to me that this timeline's portrayal of Michael was my favourite. And then a year on from that, we have Halloween Ends, the supposed conclusion to this franchise, and one that has been criticised from nearly every angle since its release 1 year prior to me filming this. According to most, this was one of the worst Halloween films to date, and looks to fall to the exact same problems that we've seen with many franchise conclusions, with Jurassic World Dominion being one of the many recent examples. There was, however, an occasional shout of praise for this movie. You know, for every 3 or 4 people that didn't like it, there was someone that really enjoyed it. That didn't do enough for me, however, and last Tuesday night I sat down in a cinema to watch Halloween Ends with the pre-decided notion that it was already a failure. But then I watched it, and to be completely honest, I loved it. Halloween Ends is by no means a perfect movie, but it comes out of the gate swinging with a cold open that completely defied my expectations when I saw that the opening kill wasn't actually committed by Michael, rather Corey, the person who acts almost as this movie's primary antagonist. Right off the bat, this is one of the many criticisms that people in general have with this film, and I want to say I get it. I really get why you might have problems with this angle that they took. I just don't share that problem at all. We just had a movie where Michael was at his best, only to be beaten within an inch of his life. Sure, he prevails in the end up, but after the time jump between that movie and this one, it's clear these injuries would have taken their toll on his aging body. I mean, come on, this guy has to be in his 80s and festering with more injuries than the average human takes in his lifetime. I think to expect Michael to be that unstoppable brute again is just unreasonable. Michael is a much bigger presence in this movie than people seem to be giving it credit for, and to be honest, that kind of sucks, because since he's not physically there, people just aren't acknowledging it. We watched Michael tear through the streets of Haddonfield. The Curse of the Shape is in full force, and Laurie describes it as such in the opening of this movie. The shape and the fear he imposes lingers through the town even when he doesn't. I actually really like the mythos in this film. I like that even gone, Michael is still stalking this town in some way. Sure, there has been a few year time jump, but people are still definitely traumatised by the events of that Halloween night. I've also seen an awful amount of criticism saying that this movie is bad because it doesn't have enough Michael Myers for a Halloween movie, and I will let you have that if you hear me out here. I've seen from multiple different people that the approximate amount of screen time that Michael has here is around 10 minutes and 55 seconds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let you have your criticism that there's not enough Michael here, if you then hold the same sentiment for the original movie where his time clocks in at around 9 minutes and 37 seconds. Because by your logic that you are imposing here, this film is better than the original, and I doubt you want to go by that statement. Halloween Ends tries to do something bold, something unique, something that develops the Myers storyline in a way that this timeline was yet to attempt, and while I think there's room for improvement, I like this idea that evil isn't born like Myers' own upbringing had suggested. It can also be created. The use of Corey as a second killer and the one who was going to take up the mantle is a good one, becoming that same face of evil that Michael had been for so long until now. This concept creates this legacy idea to the whole psycho killer angle, and I respect the balls that everyone involved had to want to even attempt something so bold in the franchise conclusion. And let me tell you, it works. I'm sorry, but it really does. I've also seen it said a few times that Laurie is underutilized, and honestly, I really don't get that. This is the final movie in this franchise. This is Laurie's chance to finally get the closure that she's been looking for since 1978. She's still heavily intrinsic to the end of Michael Myers' reign of terror over Haddonfield. I genuinely think that people still believe Michael is specifically after her, and that plays into a massive reason why they feel she isn't in the movie enough. I will talk on this more in a few minutes, but I do briefly want to touch upon the main characters of this film, Allyson and Corey. Now come on, a Halloween movie without Michael or Laurie as its main characters? I can already hear some of you shouting criminal behaviour, but I'm honestly fully behind that decision. I completely support that, and I think they nailed it. Corey is introduced to Allyson through Laurie after she finds him in a pretty bad place. It's trauma that unites these two to begin with, and before too long they find themselves in love with one another. Now this here shows early signs of being this almost cute redemption story through romance, with these two trauma-inflicted victims helping each other by leaning on the other. I want to say that I absolutely loved Rowan Campbell's performance here. I think it's simplistic and complex at the same time, because he has to do a lot of acting with his eyes alone, and he nails it. A lot of people aren't going to vibe with it to begin with, because they're probably waiting for the 80-year-old man to pick up the knife and speedrun a massacre while hunting down Laurie. But personally, I'm so glad this movie didn't do that again. Halloween Ends is different, and that's made apparently clear in the opening credits, where the colouring matches that of Season of the Witch, which, if you're not aware, is the only other strikingly different film in this franchise. Don't get me wrong, there is issues. The film feels a little bloated at times because there's one too many scenes of Laurie describing the fact that she can now see the evil from Michael in Corey's eyes. This adds a lot of weight to the film and makes it feel more bloated than it already was. Halloween Ends presents this interesting idea, that with the aging, dying Michael, trauma can be outlived. The whole story of this film, as well as the ending with Laurie finally getting that chance to walk off into the sunset, solidifies this as the movie's intent. There is so much in this movie that acts as a homage or a callback to what came before. There's so many shots that emulate scenes from the original, but at the same time it doesn't allow itself for one mere second to be bound to the source material that it's doing so much to respect and care for. It's a sign of the times. Michael Myers is nearing his end. We see glimpses of the old Michael in flashes, because while being old and decrepit, when we see him kill, we see him filled with an almighty rage as his body convulses and bubbles over. When he eventually does return, his rampage is short-lived and almost sad. He claims one life in the third act, and that is Corey. For most of the movie's kills, Corey is the culprit, he is the killer, and I like this. The scene where Corey wrestles the mask from the decaying Myers is a nice sign of the power struggle on display here. And while Corey's brief bloodshed implies this passing of the torch moment, Corey's story inevitably ends with a joint effort from both Laurie and Michael. In this very symbolic act, David Gordon Green makes it clear that he's not here to replace what came before, he's really here to end it. Halloween 2018 was a tremendous return to form, a fantastic return to these characters that we knew and recognised, showcasing perfectly how the trauma had shaped Laurie as a person. The handling of the trauma in that movie was fantastic, and it's evidently clear that Laurie and Michael are equal focal points throughout. Halloween Kills changed this. It sidelined Laurie and instead chose to focus on the brutality of the shape. Michael is shown here at his best, his most ruthless, and it's clear that he's the focal point of this movie. The concept of who is the monster is a constant within the narrative cycle in that film, and it ends with what we all expected. The answer is him. Now Halloween Ends does the exact same thing in flipping the script, but for some reason it's infinitely more polarising between fans. This is Laurie's story, this is her journey, her chance to overcome the trauma she's lived with since 1978. She is a survivor, she outlives her trauma. Jamie Lee Curtis performs what is arguably one of her best performances as a character she has shaped since the late 70s, and the wide array of emotions she portrays with Laurie shows she is definitely one of the most looked after characters in the movie and in this franchise as a whole, a statement that isn't really agreed upon within the fan base at the minute. For every way that David Gordon Green's Halloween trilogy feels messy and disjointed, there's also a unifying statement that they all fall under. It doesn't really work as a cohesive statement, but each of them are undeniably distinctive, and I have huge respect for Green and his reluctance to rehash the formula one last time. It's clear that much like Michael transcending the status of human, Halloween Ends transcends the idea of a typical slasher movie, because at its core, this is almost a showcase, a vision of a society injected with this undying fear, with everyone allowing the shadows to become this stalker-like figure, thus prolonging the grip that Myers has had on the town. Above all else, I'd say that Halloween Ends also surpasses the need to be labelled as a slasher film. This is a psychological horror, showing how that fear I mentioned can not only let evil remain festering in the darkness, but it can also create new evil in new outlets. the means to a short-term solution and a face to blame. I think it's fair to be shocked with the direction that this movie took. However, I think too many people are getting confused with the concept of being different and being bad. This takes the Halloween franchise for one last ride, and instead of going that same road that we've been on so many times, it goes a completely different way compared to everything else. Now, I'm going to be completely honest here, I can see this movie having two outcomes a few years down the line, and this is a scenario where I don't see the middle ground here. Either we're going to look back on this movie with a hell of a lot of love and we're going to understand what they tried to do and it's going to be seen and appreciated, or it's just going to be forgotten. I say this because I don't feasibly see a scenario in a few years where we still have people saying this movie sucks. I really don't. I believe this initial outrage is a reaction to the lack of what they expected, and that's going to pass, I'm sure of it. Jamie Lee Curtis has promoted this thing with pride and passion, and if that tells me anything, it's that she's so damn proud of how this movie managed to wrap up Laurie's story after many years of trauma. And if she thinks that, then it's definitely more than good enough for me. But yeah, it might be the unpopular opinion right now, but I loved Halloween Ends, and no amount of shallow-ended criticism is going to change that.
If you think about being known for something, the idea that I get to be known as the girl who never gave up is a really powerful legacy that I don't take for granted at all, and I am moved by it every time I really think about it, because it's human, because it's just the human condition, which is hard. And I represent the girl that has survived it, and it's a privilege for me.
Thank you all so much for watching my review of Halloween Ends. If you enjoyed it, feel free to like it and share it with your friends. It lets me know I'm doing something right with the content. And if you don't want to miss out on future videos, you can hit the subscribe button. It's completely free, and I'll hand you over a receipt so you can return it at any time. In the comments, as well as letting me know if you've seen Halloween Ends, also be sure to let me know what your favourite Halloween movie is in general. However, to make things interesting, you can't choose the original. With that being said, my name is Jordan. I hope you all had a fantastic day, and I'll see you all in the next one.